All right, so live once again, really early in the morning. Have myself my nice herbal mushroom latte. Got some quinoa going here on the side, so I'm ready to go. Also have myself a nice outline that I plan to go over in this video rather than just filming it in my normal setup. I'll just do it live. And I know I say this every time, but I really have other things to do, so I'm not going to stay on for very long. I'm just going to come on and do the video and then pop off. So this is something that I've been thinking about quite a lot, actually since I was a little kid, and I'll share examples of many things that I found quite confusing, perplexing as a little kid, and things that I couldn't really have answered, and things that have really persisted uh, throughout my adult life as well. So, getting to the whole thesis of the video is that I really believe um, that a lot of the widespread, massive mental health problems that we have, at least in America, are caused by deep cognitive dissonance that is just inherent in our culture because a lot of times deceit to varying degrees is sort of the fabric and the social norm and the currency of social exchange. So I'm going to make a few claims in addition to that one, and then I'm going to give you examples of what I mean, and then I'm going to tell you why I think this is important to focus on and why I focus on these things and why I think people should as well and what the benefits are, especially as that relates to how the world is probably going to go over the next few years and really how it's gone over the last few years as well. So that's the first claim is that mass mental health is caused by deep cultural cognitive dissonance based on the just forms of deceit and coercion that are kind of the norm in our culture. Second claim is that on a wide scale, people often do not really care about the virtuous placards that they're putting forth, which I'll unpack this in a bit, because usually in a functional way, meaning if we actually look at the real results, if we look at the tangible outcomes, like the proof is in the pudding, the rubber hits the road, like that kind of thing, then more often than not, it's actually just a form of emotional coercion for varying degrees. And third claim is that oftentimes it's not really the case that people are so bothered by things that they perceive as to be harsh or judgmental. They're usually bothered by the fact if that attitude is directed towards their preferences or something that they are personally invested in. And they're at the same time usually completely at ease with those things being directed at things or people that they do not agree with. So those are the first three claims. And I realized that making these three claims might be offensive or rude, or to quote, or to quote someone to quote some of the comments. People were like, you're just talking trash, and you won't say this to anyone's face, and you're too weak to say this in real life because you don't want to fight someone or you're afraid you're going to get beat up. It's like, okay, dude, that's really where you want to go with this. Okay. Is this the playground again? I thought we were adults and I thought this was YouTube. Anywho, um, so I realized these claims might be like, oh my God, kind of offensive or jarring or whatever. And of course, just as a caveat, what I'm saying is obviously not 100% true 100% of time. Of course, there are many exceptions. I'm speaking to general dynamics and general underlying causes within our culture that I think at a core grind people's gears over a long term and erode their degree of empowerment and efficacy as a human being, and then lead to a whole host of compensation patterns and addictions, compulsions, um, which which it's funny because I'll say things like this, and then I'll get these harsh criticisms, usually from men that are very likely addicted to porn and video games, and probably themselves not living a very productive and efficient life. So it's like, okay, you're just an exact product of the thing that I'm talking about, which verifies what I'm talking about as being true. And then you're encountered with the reality, or at least the whiff of that reality. And then your reaction is to predictably lash out and defend that thing that you really probably don't even care about. It's just inherited and put within you. But like I said, I've been there. I've been the guy that that jerked off compulsively, and played lots of video games and did all manner of things to numb out and escape from my reality. So I mean, that's just part of human nature, which is why I'm able to speak about it. So I realize these things can be offensive, and I'm not saying they're 100% true 100% of the time. Why I am saying it is because I think, firstly, we can look at these examples that I'm going to give. We can look at these dynamics that I'm talking about. And if we are interested in self development, personal growth, healing, or self help, then we can then look in ourselves and see if these things are at play. Because if I encounter something like this in the world, I also always look at myself and see, am I doing this? Have I done this? Is this affecting me? Because otherwise, what's the point? Like, to me, that's always the point. Meaning, like, as an example, if I go into like a spiritual group or some group organized around training, and I see, if I look at the group and like a bunch of people are making a mistake or they're being held back, I don't just sit there, oh my God, these people are so dumb. Oh my God, they're so dumb. Like, I can't believe they're doing this mistake. Oh my God. Da, da, da," which I think is what people think that I do. I mean, maybe depending on how absurd it is, like if they're putting things in their anus or like doing something crazy or like holding each other's genitals or something insane, then yeah, I might be like, oh my God, this is ridiculous. But on this flip side, the only reason I'm doing that is so I can look at myself and say, am I making these mistakes? Or can I acknowledge them and then avoid them and maybe save myself the time and the energy and the hassle so that I can have a more efficient and effective usage of my time? That's the point. That's the outcome. I'm not sure why that's such a confusing or jarring concept for so many people, but to me, it's just sort of common sense. And it's never in really, unless people are putting things in their anus or doing something so perverse like that, then of course it's not personal. It's just some sort of like whatever. Anyways, getting on to the, so what I'm saying this is that if we're interested in these things, might be important to understand and important to look at because we're going to be affected by it regardless. Because we live in, at least if you live in modern America, you're going to be affected by these dynamics. You are going to interact with these dynamics, and if you don't realize them, you don't see them, then you're just confused or ignorant or just in denial or whatever, which is probably not going to produce the best outcome. And the last and most important reason is that why I focus on this, why I've been focusing on topics like this for the last year or two, something like that, is because of the decay we are going through and the decay that we will be going through, where so many people can't recognize reality and they're losing grip with reality in their personal subjective experience and within the world. Even just the way things are trending towards AI and sex robots and chat robots and all the fake profiles that are on social media and fake news outlets and fake deep fakes and all this stuff that's happening that will only get worse and stronger. And actually, the technology will get better. It will get more efficient. It'll be harder to tell real versus fake. The same thing will occur for people psychologically, because we are reflections of the tools that we use, and the tools that we use shape our psychology and shape our reality. I thought people knew this. I thought this was obvious, but I guess it isn't. So that's why I'm harping on all these kind of basic, stupid ideas that obviously no one really cares about and people don't really want to engage with the vast majority of the time. And instead, it just makes me seem like kind of a kind of a jerk or whatever. Um, because I focus on uncomfortable, harsh, unpleasant topics at times. But I mean, I'm very happy if people have not encountered uncomfortable or harsh realities within life. I'm happy if they haven't encountered individuals that are harsh and exploitative. I'm very grateful and happy that they've had that experience. But that does not change the fact that these dynamics exist in the world, and many people do engage with them and do have been confronted with them, maybe from an early age, maybe at a later age. But the fact is, they exist, and they exist within all of us. Like, and I'll unpack this as we get through the examples. And this is really where the rubber hits the road, is that these things are in all of us. It's part of just human nature. None of us are really above it. And coincidentally, it's almost as if basically every major religion and spiritual tradition has been saying the same thing since, I don't know, the beginning of time. It's almost as if they were trying to port our awareness towards something within ourselves that we might want to that we might want to at least take to such a level of efficiency that we can then put it aside. Because just as a caveat, in terms of spirituality and development within the internal arts, the personality, the self, and the emotional psychology, health, whatever, it's only as important as getting it to the point of a degree of efficiency that we can just kind of forget about it and cast it aside. Whereas if you look at everyone's fixating on it because they think that's what spirituality is trying to rearrange all these psychology things and all this weird amalgamation of cherry picking spiritual concepts that are poorly defined and poorly understood with some Jungian psychology and just pulling in a bunch of stuff and thinking that's really it. The point when it's actuality, basically like learning to ride, like let's say you want to win Tour de France, which is, like a world famous cycling thing, but you think the way to do that is through obsessing by training wheels. It's like, yeah, obviously training wheels are kind of in the process, but obsessing over training wheels will absolutely never get you to the point of competing in Tour de France. So this is what you have people fixating on the lowest, most basic, almost trivial aspects of it that are, yes, important, yes, have to be done, but really only to the point of a certain degree of efficiency and effectiveness so that they can just be kind of put aside and they don't really get in the way anymore. That's basically it. But again, people have completely misconstrued that, which is completely understandable because we're talking about difficult subjects and difficult aspects of humanity and human nature and human life, which I think that's another huge disservice that so many of the kind of pop ideas give people is that they think this stuff is easy. People think it's easy because they're conditioned in sort of like a Amazon Prime, Netflix instant streaming sort of mindset where it's like, well, I want to have this experience. I'm a modern human. I should get to do these things because I feel like I deserve it. And it's like, that's not really how the world works. But then if I point out that now I'm mean, harsh, critical, judgmental, I'm an asshole, I'm a repressed, this is a new one I'll start including it. I'm a repressed individual that's only creating these situations because of all of my repressed negative feelings and emotions and all this other stuff. It's like, okay. um, so anyways, these are my claims. Mass mental health caused by deep cultural cognitive dissonance. And secondly, people often don't really care about the virtuous placards that they're hiding behind because it's usually a form of emotional coercion. And then thirdly, people are not usually bothered by what they perceive to be harsh or judgmental unless it's directed at something that is a part of their preference. If it's directed at something they're against or a person they don't like, totally fine. Doesn't even register. So, anyways, now let me unpack some of these ideas that I've been waffling about with some examples. So there are really so many historical events that resulted in the death of millions of people, whether that's World War II type things with communism, and also what the Nazis were up to, and Cultural Revolution in China, and what happened in Cambodia, what happened in Vietnam, what happened in even Korea. And we can go back through history, but these are just recent times, and there's even things that are happening right now. But the thing is, most people don't really understand these historical events to much degree or depth. But what they all have in common is that they were all executed for the good of the people, or at least for the good of one side of the people. And they were all executed under virtuous slogans and placards. They were all for equality and creating a more just and fair world or for righting some wrong. So if that doesn't make sense or that sounds like a weird thing, just study history. Look at all of these events, even just 100 years, 200 years, 300 years, that resulted in the deaths of millions and 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 millions of people. And they were all executed under these for the greater good. So then in modern times, we can look at things that are happening right now for the greater good. And I'm automatically suspicious. I'm like, yeah, I don't know about that, guys. uh, let's maybe pump the brakes. But you have a lot of people just completely buying it hook, line, and sinker. So I can give you a second example where this is something that I grew up in, where I grew up in the Christian church or surrounded by basically all Christians in my entire community. Everyone went to church. Everyone's talking about love and tolerance and, moral behavior. But at the same time, they're literally demonizing anyone who thinks differently, anyone who questions anything, or anyone who believes or behaves differently, or perhaps looks a different way or has a different culture. That was happening in my life, and I was like, "Well, that's weird. I just went to church and we're learning these things," but then I look at the behavior and the actions of all these people, and it's pretty much the opposite. It's just the opposite based in, like, here's this set of behaviors and small things that we define as good, and then here's everything else that's bad. So, we're gonna say we're against or we're for, like, love and tolerance and compassion and inclusion and all these things, but only within this small parameter, and everything else we're completely against and we're going to shoot down and demonize. I'm like, well, that doesn't really make sense. And then if we actually look at history, whether it's the Crusades or the Salem witch trials or colonialism or a great deal of many things, we can see again another great example of how many people were killed and tortured under a flag of morality and virtue, and it didn't really pan out too well for them. It's like all these people are like, I'm gonna I'm gonna harm you and torture you for your own good. Like, what? So you're gonna make me experience the thing that you're against, but it's because you're for their own good. So the thing is, these wider dynamics we can all kind of sort of agree with, maybe if we study history for 15 minutes. But then if I bring it down to a micro level and I mention things that people tend to align with and believe in, whether that's spiritual things or left leaning progressive politics or right leaning politics or red pill or whatever, now all of a sudden people have a problem. And it's like these same dynamics are at play. We inherited all these things to a certain degree because we're human beings. And then even in modern times, I remember growing up learning about love and tolerance and moral behavior, but then hearing obviously all the scandals that were happening in the Catholic Church. It's like, well, wait, they're saying all these things in the world, but then behind closed doors, they're doing basically the exact opposite. And then I saw through history just the horrible things that the Catholic Church had done and how it was more or less just an institution of power and control and wealth consolidation under the guise of this virtuous flag. And I was like, well, that doesn't really add up. And this is all coming from me as a kid, basically, a young child or a very young teenager. And then also numerous mega pastors and owners of mega churches in America, again, preaching love and tolerance and compassion and moral behavior, but then they get caught for fraud, tax evasion, or they get found out being gay, or they get found out cheating on their wives, or having some perverted sexual dynamics going on in their church, or all manner degree of whatever, right? And then if you just go on Netflix, you go on Amazon, you go on iTunes, you can look up all these documentaries of cults of all shapes and sizes, and they basically all fall under these same exact categories, these same exact dynamics. People organize around these virtuous ideas or things because they're emotionally manipulated and masturbating to this thing. And then it ends up being the exact situation, the exact dynamic that they claim to be against. But I guess that makes me a judgmental, mean, critical, harsh asshole who's repressed and have a deep, dark shadow that I need to look at. And I just need to, you know, realize that I'm creating all this conflict because of my own internal emotional wounding. And I need to look at my internal emotional wounding. And then this conflict won't exist. It's like, what? I'm probably going to keep repeating that a few times because it's on my mind and it's kind of funny because it also happens to be a direct manifestation of all the stuff that I'm talking about here. Because people inherit these ideas, but they don't trace them back to where they came from. They inherit these ideas that they make them feel good in the moment, but they don't question the fact that that idea might be deeply flawed. It might be completely incorrect, but it makes them feel good in the moment. So hey, that's all that matters. Um, so I can give you more great examples of this, especially living in Portland for nearly a decade. I've met hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of left-leaning people that preach tolerance, love, compassion, inclusion, equality, but at the same time will basically wish death upon anyone that doesn't agree with them or who has a difference of opinion. They will preach all of these things, but then still carry within them and enact deep prejudice and bigotry. But then, so I can give you a great example. Like they're all about love and tolerance and compassion and equality and inclusion. And then the next breath, they'll wish death on Trump. I remember when Trump had COVID, I was hanging out with a group of people who all fall under this category. They're talking about all this stuff about how, we just need to restore decency to the White House and decency to politics. And, we need to have inclusion and compassion in our society and all the stuff they're going on, which I'm like, yeah, I agree. Like these are all great ideas. And then the conversation for the next hour was making fun of Trump, making fun of his family, wishing he would die, hoping he dies a painful death, hoping he suffers with COVID, hoping that all the right wing conservative people suffer and die with COVID, hoping that anyone that didn't get a vaccine gets the worst COVID and they kill their family. And like basically just all of this kind of stuff. And I'm like, well, wait, I thought you wanted to create decency and like an inclusive, loving, tolerant, compassionate society, but you're literally wishing death and suffering on people who might see it as might see a subject differently than you. But then if I mention that, now I'm the target. Now I'm the asshole. I'm arrogant. I think I'm better than everyone. I think I'm whatever all these predictable responses that people have. And I'm just kind of like, okay, I don't know what bizarro reality we're living in here, guys, but you spend an hour talking about love and compassion and tolerance, and then you spend an hour wishing death and suffering on people that didn't agree with you. But I'm the asshole in the situation, and I had to go sort out my emotional wounding because of saying something that I thought was obviously true or something. And then another example I can give you that I took me a while to understand because I hadn't really encountered it so much until I moved to Portland is a lot of feminists using equality, not wanting actual equality. What they actually mean is they want to basically become the toxic man that they claim to hate and be against. Basically, like I can't tell you the massive amount of progressive feminists that I've met who are literally just the men that they claim to hate. Shitty communicators. They promiscuously use people for sex. They manipulate people emotionally. They use left-leaning political ideas to coerce and manipulate people and control the power dynamic. They basically just exploit people and use them for their own personal gain and benefit because they perceive themselves as some kind of victim. And I'm like, well, that sounds a lot like the behavior that you claim to be against. And actually, if you look up Andrew Schultz, he has like a hilarious bit about the whole thing, about how he went to a women's rights rally and he was like, "Are these feminists or fuckboys?" Like, it's hilarious, but he's talking about the same kind of dynamic. So it's just something that I saw as a child and kind of I found a little bit bothersome. But what happened is that I believed that what I saw was actually wrong because everyone, or not everyone, but most of the people in my reality were like, you're mean, you're harsh, you're critical, you're judgmental, you think you're arrogant, or you are arrogant, you think you're better than everyone else, you're condescending, you're all these things. And or now in adult life, it's you're wounded or you're a toxic masculinity, whatever, or you're the patriarchy or your misogyny or Christians are like Jesus is the only way to the truth and the light, and you're haven't you're not saved because you're not a Christian and you don't love Jesus. All of these things, they all share the same underlying fabric and the same underlying dynamics, but none of the people involved in any way, shape, or form are aware of it, or at least to my knowledge, to my judging that based on their behavior. Um, yeah, I mean, I think polite condescension is definitely the most annoying because this is the thing, and this is why I don't feel like that I've ever, at least in my opinion, I could be wrong, but I don't feel like I come off as condescending because I don't assume like a moral high ground. My assumption is I'm in the shit just like everyone else. That's how I'm able to talk about it. And secondly, I don't put out these like moral, like virtuous ideals and slogans of like, if you only just saw the way, truth, and the light, then your life would be perfect. And look how great mine is. Never done that. Never will do that. My attitude is always like, here's what I see, and here's maybe how it's broken, and maybe here's a better way to look at it or how to interact with it. Because as these are all dynamics that we all face and we all will deal with. So to me, that's just honest. Like that's the reality of my experience. Is these are things that I see. Here's my opinion of it. Could be wrong, but here's my opinion. And here's why I think what I think. And here's why I think this is useful and helpful. I don't know how much more honest that I really could be. I guess the fact that I feel self-important enough to like make videos about it and have a YouTube channel, I guess maybe that's something. I don't know. Um, but that's yeah, to me that's not really condescending. That's just kind of true. Like if I came on and said like greetings, infinite love blessings, I have attained the highest heights of spiritual transcendence and enlightenment embodied, and I've healed and merged my shadow with the great oneness of the great hard heart eagle at the center of the cosmos, and I want to share with you the true path to illumination. To me, that's really condescending, and and it's not true. Actually, if actually to be fair, if everything that person said in that stupid example was actually true, I would be on board. Like if someone came on and said, like, look, I'm a multi-billionaire and you're broke. I'm going to teach you how to be a multi-billionaire. I'm going to be like, shit, please teach me because what the guy's saying is true. It might be uncomfortable and I'd be like, damn, I am broke. Damn, this guy is a billionaire, but okay, give me the information. Um, but to me, that just is common sense. So, anyways, those are the examples. And I think, I mean, I can understand why they're offensive and why it makes me seem like a mean person or whatever other personal attack that people might try to loft. But again, I think it's just this massive um, cultural cognitive dissonance. Because if a person has a conscience and they grow up in a world that is just packing them full of all of these inherent contradictions and lies, that's going to make them feel kind of like off, like uncomfortable. Because when you have this deep degree of moral conflict, you cannot be in your body. This is, I'll tell you, this is basically why religions and spiritual traditions have all of these rules and regulations and guidelines, is because if you're in this profound degree of moral conflict and deceit and cognitive dissonance, you cannot be in your body. You cannot accurately engage with your experience. As a result of that, you have no choice but to exist in a disembodied state, i.e., hell. Like in believing in all these things and following all these desires and following all of your emotions and getting led down all of these crazy rabbit holes of falsehood or sin, basically, to put it in another way, because you are so profoundly morally conflicted that you cannot be in your body. And because you cannot be in your body, you're not able to be guided by your conscience. So now you're just relying on the world, which every religion and spiritual tradition has said is not a great idea. But then you have modern spiritual people and even a lot of religious people doing exactly that, following their subjective feelings, following their emotional whims, following the stimulation of their nervous system, basically following all of the things that all of the traditions and religions tell them not to do or tell them are mistakes. But that's what they're doing, which is fine. I mean, it's it's not fine. What I mean is, it's of course it will happen because it's a difficult thing. It's a difficult subject. It's a difficult part of life experience. It's a difficult part of humanity. It's a difficult endeavor, period. So of course people are gonna fuck up. Like we all are. Like, I mean, if you look at even just the easy, trivial things that we humans do and do a terrible job at, myself included. And then we think we're gonna jump into something profoundly transformational and transcendental, and it's just gonna be like, oh, a piece of cake. Come on. It's gonna be proportionally difficult. So I think this is really what messes a lot of people up. So, and I can tell you, and I think I started this thread earlier, but I got distracted. So what I'm saying is, when I was a kid, I would have basically these same ideas, these same opinions, these same uh whatever opinions, right? But I was a kid, so I didn't really have the sense of self to actually have it based in a lot or really understand it to a degree. And because you're a kid, you look up to the bigger people in your environment because they're bigger than you and they're the authority figures. So when they more or less, come at you with all myriad of weird emotional subterfusion, then at a certain point you start to kind of get wound up. But I can tell you, the more that I've actually gotten honest with myself about these dynamics and allowed myself to have a inner directed sense of reality, actually great deal, if not almost all, the mental health issues and anxiety and depression and stress and stuff that I felt pretty much went away just from that. Because you have to look at what's actually causing it. And for a lot of people, that's what's actually causing it. And it's just why their nervous system is always just like, and then, yeah, of course, people have negative experiences or traumatic events or people abuse them or people hurt them, of course. But I just think on a wide scale, this mass deep cognitive dissonance that people are actively engaged in causes a lot of mental health problems and a lot of physiological health problems. um, because people often actually don't really care about the virtues that they put out. It's more often than not a form of emotional coercion. And all I'm saying, and all I'm ever suggesting is do your own research, kind of like Alex Jones in 2000 and 2001. Like, do your own research. Don't believe me. But that's what I'm saying is look in life, see if it's true. Because I've looked in life. I gave you all or some of the examples. I could give you and sit here all day and give you more examples and more illustrations, but I've given you some about how I arrived at those things, and you can go and find and do your own thing. And if you don't agree, if it doesn't make sense, then fine. Um, but I'm just sharing it because I think we can look at our own behavior and our own self, especially if we're trying to do self development, healing, and personal growth. And then secondly, because of the mass profound societal and social decay that we are living through right now, and we will continue to be living through until we arrive at probably some kind of technological dystopia. But it's just, these are also the dynamics in the way in which our media works in America. I can't speak for the world, but at least in America. And I just really encourage people to learn to listen, meaning listen to what people are saying and then look at their actions, look at their behaviors, and then see what's actually behind it and what the real nitty gritty rubber hits the road tangible outcome of what people are saying. And then be especially weary when it comes with all of these high-minded moral kinds of things like, oh, all about love and tolerance and moral behavior and all about compassion and inclusion, equality, and all of these things. And it's like, I mean, yeah, as social ideals and things that we should strive for as a society, for sure. But uh, historically, those have not panned out in the way in which we thought it would. And if that doesn't make sense, I would look at history. History has plenty of examples. And the last thing I'll say is to be able to navigate all of these things and not be bitter and depressed and jaded and weighed down is really the goal. Because I'll repeat this again. I deeply admire people who have not encountered the harsh realities of life or the uncomfortable aspects of human nature. But the fact of the matter is, they are there. They are in all of us. They are in every human that's ever existed and will ever exist. Well, I don't know. We'll see about these like AI human hybrids and consciousness and computers and transhumanism kind of stuff that they want to do that because they want to basically delete this stuff part of they want to delete this part of humanity. Well, the thing is, they say they want to like create a morally unjust society, but in actuality, they just want to create a society in which they can allow their perversions to run amok. Which I don't know if people are aware of this. This is a tangent as a side note, but if we look up the work of Jennifer Bilek, Bilek, and look at who's funding and who's behind the transhumanism movement, it's more or less just degenerate, immoral people who want to create a society that will have no problem with their terrible behavior. But the way in which they're accomplishing it and trying to push it through is under the guise of creating a just and fair and equal world. So do with that information what you will, but that's those are true statements. You can investigate it on your own time. Um, so the fact is, these harsh realities exist. They exist within all of us, and I guess I'm grateful and I envy people who have not encountered it. They've had a very comfortable, easy life to where if I say really basic things, that's somehow like a meltdown inducing trigger alert. But the fact of the matter is, these things exist. You can choose to be in denial, you can choose to be in ignorance, or you can maybe just engage with it or at least be aware of it to some degree. And the point I'm making is to be aware of it, to engage with it, but not be consumed by it and not be just depressed, apathetic, and miserable. Like when I make videos about dating, a lot of the comments are just like people just threw in the towel and are completely like just resigned, which honestly is very sad. Um, but I think people are resigned in many areas of life, not just within dating. So that's very sad. But then I think the mistake a lot of people made over the years is assumed that I was in that position as well because I made videos talking about like negative emotional states or whatever. And I think one of the most popular videos I made in recent times was like why I've been angry and whatever or something. I can't remember what it was called. But those types of videos that people like really resonated with and it got a lot of views and engagement, people assume that's like where I was like, no, I'm very much engaged with life and trying to move my life forward and create things and be creative in the world and try to live my best life basically and have good relationships. So I think maybe that degree of I don't know what you would call that, but I guess people are confused that these two things could exist at the same time. But it's just more so the fact that I've experienced really a lot of the darker side of reality. So for me, talking about it and whatever is it's fine. It's not bothersome. But I know for I guess a lot of people it's like a big deal or it's like a revolutionary thing or it's even a very bothersome triggering thing or whatever. And it's like it's part of life, guys. I mean, I could talk about sex. I have as much as I've talked about societal dynamics and emotional things and whatever. I could also make just as much content about sex or food or masturbation or like any other facet of human life to just the same degree and detail, but I just choose not to because that would just be kind of weird to talk about those kinds of subjects to such a degree. Although it would actually probably get a lot more clicks and probably get a lot more positive engagement because that's the part of reality that people are more comfortable. Like I get like okay, I can tell you if I made a video that was like how to build your jing as a man while you jack off to porn, I guarantee you that would be a viral, massive sensation. They don't want you to know that jerking off to porn every day actually boosts your testosterone and is great for your mental health. Watch my video now to discover the 3 secrets of jerking it to porn and the exact types of porn that you must jerk it to and the specific time of day you need to jerk it and the exact position you must hold your member to give yourself the maximum jing stimulation. That video would fucking explode. I guarantee you. Why? Because it taps into all the ridiculousness and perversion and dysfunction that people already have, and that's what they really, 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 really want. Like, how do I do I mean, this is how, like, the medical system and the mainstream kind of functions is, here's all your bad behaviors, but here's a bunch of stuff to allow you to just kinda keep it up. And everyone's like, "Great, that's exactly what I want. How can I keep doing the thing that's making me ill, but how can I do it longer and better? Help me, please." So society's like, "Yeah, sure, here you go." So yeah, I could make videos like that, but the point I'm making is these are just different facets of the human experience that I could talk to about, but I just choose not to. Uh, so yeah, I think that's the end of what I want to say. I'll answer a few questions and then I'll wrap it up soon as I finish my latte and smell my agarwood. Dude, Inner Wisdom says, dude, years ago I was triggered by a lot of the stuff you said, and just because I was that person who you talked about, I'm really grateful that I haven't unsubscribed and kept learning from you. Yeah, I mean, I get that. That's cool. I commend. I mean, I don't know you in any way, shape, or form other than your username Inner Wisdom, which is good. I like that one. I'm glad you did that, and it takes a certain degree of fabric to be able to do that, I think. Um, but also too, I don't really know. I don't know what I said. I don't know what you reacted to. I don't know if what you reacted to was even what I meant. But again, this is just a subjective experience. Um, People say things and people kind of make it into their own thing and their own whatever. That's kind of also why I made videos where I said I don't really care that much about what people think about what I say, which of course I do care because I'm a human. But I just mean more so I don't invest too much in it because of just the massive degree of subjectivity. I might refine and like, okay, how can I say that better? How can I be more clear? How can I change my approach? How can I change my tone? Whatever, whatever, whatever. But in terms of someone's subjective experience, I hope that it's good and I hope that it helps them. But ultimately, that's kind of on them. That's their personal decision. Their responsibility is not something I can really do other than control what I can control and then hope for the best. So that's glad to hear it. Um, because this is a weird thing about personal growth is that it's usually uncomfortable. Not sure why that's like a uncomfortable concept for people to hear. If you went to the gym or literally did anything to change your body, it's uncomfortable. Even if you just lay on the couch forever because you think it's comfortable, eventually it will be uncomfortable. So like anything, life is going to be uncomfortable. If you want to try to change something, it's going to be uncomfortable, unpleasant. So I'm surprised that people are so whatever when they encounter something uncomfortable or unpleasant. I'm just like, this is the world, man. If you're doing personal growth, if you're doing, like growth and discomfort tend to kind of relate to each other. Um, so yeah, I think actually I outlined a course years ago about kind of like a anti self help course because I've spent so much time like saying this is wrong and this is a waste of time and blah 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 about so many different things, right? So then I was going to put together a course that's like, here's what to focus on, here's what to actually do that can really make a positive change and actually lead to growth, which can then give you a foundation to perhaps pursue something higher if that is what people are actually wanting to do. And then I did a video years ago. I think I did the same video a few times. One of them was like when spirituality is not so spiritual. And I think I don't even have the comments on because I was like, I don't even want to deal with the backlash this one's gonna get. Um, but all I did was I just sat down and broke down kind of like this video. Here's what this word is. Here's what this word means classically. And then here's the ways in which people use it and what it actually means for them. With the intention of like, if you say you care about, let's say, spirituality or something, right? Like, okay, this is what I'm going to direct my life to. Wouldn't it make sense to figure out for yourself what that even means? What does that word even mean for you? What does it even look like? What are you really actually after? So that you can at least have that degree of clarity to then achieve that in a much more efficient and effective manner. Because I've met people and they say spirituality is just whatever feels good. And I'm like, well, no, I think that's hedonism, but sure, I guess that's spirituality. Or I've asked them, what's spirituality? It's just connection. I'm like, well, I think that's just connection in a sense of community, but I guess that's spirituality. Sure. Or what's spirituality? And some people are like, oh, it's sex. And I'm like, well, no, I think that's just hedonism. And I think that's just sex, but okay. Like all these things. Or what's spirituality? Oh, I imagine that I'm connected to this other thing that only exists in my imagination. I'm like, cool, that just sounds like your imagination, but I guess that it is the thing that you think it is. Okay, fine. Classically, the term meant this, and it had all of these signs and symptoms and all of these characteristics that went along with it, and all of these markers that indicated that it was actually occurring. And everything I hear everyone say doesn't match in any way, shape, or form that classical definition or any of the criteria or any of the characteristics or any of the phenomena or any of the manifestations. Um, so, okay, cool. But anyways, those videos are up. They're older. They're not quite as good. I might redo them again in the future. But basically, the vast majority of the time, in terms of subscribers, I think I lose a lot because of the dynamics inner wisdom was explaining. But the thing is, I've noticed spiritual people are fine with me shitting on what they're against. If they're, let's just say we have a group of people that are really spiritual, whatever that means, and they also are like non-judgmental and about acceptance, but then they also are like anti-vax. So if I shit all over Anthony Fauci and Biden or even Trump and Operation Warp Speed and pharmaceutical companies, whatever, they're completely fine with saying horrible things about those people, even though it completely contradicts everything else that they're about. And then on the flip side, but I already gave those examples. You can go back and watch. So next question is, you have probably answered this, but why do you live in Portland and have you thought about leaving? I don't know how you put up with it. Well, actually, I don't live in Portland proper. I'm about 20 to 30 minutes out of the city in the suburbs, and I have been for a couple of years now. And I can tell you that it's much better. So, I mean, it's a good question. And the thing is, nowhere is perfect. So there's always going to be issues wherever you go. Obviously, they might be different issues. They might be more workable things. But I mean, people are humans, whatever. But that's a fair question. The other thing too is like I don't talk about all the positive, good experiences in my life. I don't come on here and be like, in this video, I'm going to share with you how I went out to dinner with my friends and had a great conversation and had a great time and how we really have fun with each other and how we are good friends. Everyone's like, cool, I'm happy for you, man. Good job. Or in this video, I'm going to share with you how I went on a date and everything was actually really pleasant. We just wanted different things in life and we're maybe in a different place. So it wasn't a good match. In this video, I'm going to share with you this first date that I went on where the girl was actually quite attractive and she found me quite attractive, but she wanted to have kids within 12 months and I wasn't on board with that timeline or whatever. People were like, okay, all right, cool. Not that interesting. So yeah, in this video, I'm going to share with you how I went for a hike. And it was great because I was out in the sun and the forest is amazing and the air is super clean and crisp and I like it. Like, I guess maybe I should do those kinds of videos just to kind of like give context, but I think maybe people will be confused like, who the fuck's this guy? In this video, I'm going to walk in the forest and tell you how good it is, how much I like it, and how comfortable and happy it makes me. In this video, I'm going to eat this cheeseburger. That's incredible. So there's that, but I get it. I think a lot of what you say about dating apps is true, but even it's worse because you live in a place like Portland. Yeah, I mean, to be fair, over the years, I put my dating app location in different locations to see what's the city, what's the vibe like. And yeah, definitely out here, it is for sure worse. Like, okay, everyone, if you have Tinder or just download it, just download Tinder and set your location to Portland and just, and just look at it. Just for sociological research reasons. Like, just do it. I don't know. I think you might be able to. I don't know what the cheapest option is, like $10, $15, but just do it. And just put it to Portland and see. Especially if you're a guy, just do it. uh, it's like people wouldn't even believe it. And then, yeah, but I've done it in different cities. And I'll tell you, for example, I do very poorly on dating apps relatively speaking. Apparently I do well compared to some guys that I talk to, or a lot of guys that I talk to, but compared to what I experience in other cities, it's very poor. Like, for example, if I ever set my location to like New York, LA, San Francisco, or even other international destinations, like the type of women that I engage with and attract or match with is like infinitely better, and like there's not even like a comparison to Portland. But I think it's because those are big cities and they tend to have more internationally minded, kind of like worldly minded people. Because I can tell you from my experience talking to people from different countries, different cultures, they're always surprised. They're like, wow, you're not a typical American. Wow, you're not like I thought you would be. Wow, you don't seem American at all. Wow, you know a lot about other countries. Wow, you know a lot about other cultures. Wow, you know a lot about what's actually happening in the world and not in just an America-centric way. And I'm like, well, that explains all the conflict that I experienced living in America. uh, uh, but I'm just saying, in those types of in those types of situations, it's a much better vibe and dynamic. And I think the people in general are a little more intelligent, a little more, I guess, wide-minded, so they can actually, I guess, understand where I'm coming from a little bit more. Because in many ways, a lot of America just feels like small town. Many people have these like ridiculous boxes. Like, I grew up in the Midwest. People are like, oh, you're not Christian. You don't love sports. You're weird. And then on the West Coast, it's like, oh my God, you don't love Biden and you didn't get your vax and you're not left leaning, whatever. Oh, you're weird. Um, So people just operate in these boxes, but that's our culture. So yeah, I definitely don't mention Hyperion in my profile because I don't really need strangers being aware of my business and my life. Um, so yeah, um, that's dating apps. I think part of it is just in general, from my experience, based in talking to a lot of people from a lot of different cultures, from a lot of different places of the world, Americans in general are quite small-minded, are quite unintelligent. Most of them don't leave the country, and if they do, they still don't really know much of anything about other cultures. That's just the stereotype of Americans in the world. Like we're just kind of idiots, like happy to like I remember there was one person I met was like, "Wow, you're not annoyingly overly happy." And I think what they meant was annoyingly overly emotional. Um, because I think people don't realize, or people that live in America don't realize how emotional our culture is. Even though people are like, "Oh, you're repressed. Oh, you need to process your emotions. Oh, you need to express your feelings." They don't really realize how egregiously emotional and emotionally driven our culture is, at least in America, and how obsessed and indulgent people are with that part of their experience at the expense of more useful parts of their experience. Um, so that's just part of things you learn traveling the world and meeting people from different cultures, which I highly recommend for people. I don't actually talk about it or mention it that much, but it informs my opinion and informs my worldview because I've interacted with people from a lot of different cultures and spent time studying cultures and different religions and different things and different historical periods and world events and world economic things, like different things, just to have an actual wider opinion. So the fact is, I guess I can't really be too surprised. But yeah, in my hometown in Jersey, I'm a pretentious hipster that moved to Philly. I was an uncultured hick. Yeah, I mean, that's just it's just the power of environment. Which is so. Speaking of dating, there's this thing that I learned about recently about it's called passport bros. So apparently, there's a whole movement of men that are just leaving America and going and getting a date and women and a wife from another country because of just the cesspool and the degenerate nature that they perceive the American dating market to be. Because I guess their idea is that like if you're just an average guy in America, you're basically invisible to most women. Um, Whereas if you're an average guy and you go to a long list of other countries, you're in the top 1% automatically. So that's a completely different power dynamic and a completely different dating dynamic than what a lot of guys experience in America. So I just learned about this thing called passport bros. So apparently that's a growing trend, but it just depends on where you are. It's like I guess if you're I don't know, let's say you're 6'2" and you grew up in Holland or something, probably just average. I think the average height there is like pretty tall. Let me see. Yeah, the average height for a man in the Netherlands is 6 foot, whereas the average height for a man in America, I think, is like 5'9" or 5'8", somewhere around there. So, like, if you're like 6'1" in the Netherlands, you're basically average. Come to America, now all of a sudden you're like top tier, top 15, top 5% of men. So where you are in your situation can determine a lot of uh, your identity as well, and that's sometimes the value of travel and the value of moving around is it can change people's identity. But I think the stereotype for Americans is that they don't really travel, they don't really move around much, or if they do, it's still within the same limited framework. So basically, therefore, the perception of Americans on the global scale is that we're very small-minded, very emotional and relatively unintelligent. Not my opinion. Oh, actually, that is my opinion as well. But based in just experience, and then based in traveling the world and experiencing that. So, anyways, that's it for today. That's my outline and everything. So, thanks for tuning in. And if you came in late, definitely go back and check in and watch the beginning, because that was the real content matter of the point of the video. So anyways, thanks for tuning in. Thanks for your support. And I will talk to you soon.